Hey everyone, welcome to the Groups That Grow webinar. We just want to say thank you for being here and welcome. My name is Joe Jensen. I'm on the team here at Barna. And on behalf of the team at Barna and RightNow Media, our awesome partner, I just want to say thanks for being here. We know that there's got to be some people making their way in. So I just want to, again, invite you to just feel welcomed here and just know that this is going to be a great hour where hopefully you're ministered to as a leader and equipped. We want to provide a place where this is interactive. So again, I know this webinar might be kind of a standard place. You guys are used to these webinar formats, but if you're not, just in case this might be something that's new to you, we want to just invite you to pop into the chat at any time during the program, but especially right now as you come in and just introduce yourself. Maybe share your name, where you're from, maybe the church that you attend or work in, or maybe the ministry that you serve in, or the nonprofit or whatever organization you're representing today. Yeah, we just want to get to know you. So again, if you're just making your way in, I just want to say welcome to the Groups That Grow webinar. On behalf of Barna and Right Now, we're just thrilled that you're here. As you make your way in, please introduce yourself in the chat. And anytime throughout the webinar today, just want to invite you to ask questions, to drop some thoughts or insights. Maybe there's something that stands out to you from the data presentation or from something that the panel says, maybe something that encourages you or challenges you. We just want to invite you to use that chat as a way to interact with us who are kind of on this virtual stage, but also with one another. The learning is not just from what happens in the presentations and the interviews, but it's also in the chat, because we know so many of you have so much to offer, when it comes to the experiences that you find yourself in, leading small groups, leading mentoring relationships, leading household ministry, whether that's formally, in a church setting, or even just informally. Maybe you're just a mom or a dad kind of showing up here wanting to figure out how to disciple better in the home. So wherever you might find yourself, we just want to invite you to share your thoughts, insights, and questions. I'm just going to give you a quick rundown. Again, if you're just coming in, just want to again say welcome. And if you just joined us in the last 30 seconds, my name is Joe Jensen. I work at Barna and just want to welcome you on behalf of Barna and RightNow Media to this webinar. And again, just drop your name and introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to get to know you. Hey, over the next kind of 55 to 60 minutes, we have a very simple, but I think a really great program in store for you. In just a few moments, I'm going to call up CEO of Barna, David Kinnaman. He's going to share some insights from some of the research we did in partnership with RightNow Media. And then we're going to also hear, speaking of RightNow Media, from the president of RightNow Media, Brian Mosley. He has some good thoughts and insights to share from his perspective, leading an organization that is just really called to equip the church in a really special way. So we're going to hear a few thoughts from him. And then we're going to carve out like the last half of the program to hear from three tremendous leaders and experts in this kind of relational discipleship arena. And all three of them have a really unique, but together they have a really common and unified kind of passion and expertise to equip leaders in this area of relational discipleship. So really excited to hear from them. And we're also, if we have time, we can't guarantee we'll have time, but if we do have time, we want to answer some questions. So if there's a question that pops up, either from David's presentation or from the panel interview or from something that Brian said, we'll try to invite all the leaders up at the end to answer some of your questions. So feel free to utilize the Q&A feature, which is different than the chat feature. So we won't catch your questions if you ask them in the chat for our Q&A time, but we will be able to process some of those in the Q&A. So feel free, if you have a question for the panel or for David, you can leave that there. Well, hey, before we get started, there's going to be one opportunity that you're going to hear about 2 or 3 times over the course of this webinar that I want to bring your attention to. It's a really special program that we have put together in partnership with RightNow Media called Barna Collab Transformational Small Groups. We're really excited about this. You'll hear about this a couple more times throughout today's program, but I want to just tease it out a little bit for you now and let you know what's coming. This is going to be a 5-week kind of guided experience, virtual, to help you strengthen the leaders within your group ministry, to help deepen discipleship and unleash the power of groups. It's I've gone to like 2 day conferences, my entire ministry career, and I love conferences, but to have a 5 week experience where you can go deeper in the insights and in the learnings and in the applications, it's a tremendous opportunity. It's also priced affordably, so you can not only come yourself, but you can also bring your team. We have a special 20% discount that's exclusive to today's audience. So it's a 48-hour flash sale. It expires in 2 days. So I encourage you to get an additional 20% off. Use the promo code webinar20. And when you sign up, you'll also get a free digital download to the discipleship and community report that we did that has all the research we did in partnership with RightNow Media, which you'll hear a little bit more about later in today's program. So it's a great opportunity. I'd encourage you to take advantage of this special webinar offer. I'm telling you, you won't regret it. I'll tell you a little bit more about that program a little bit later in the program. Well, hey, I'm going to kick things off to David, but before I do, I just want to say a prayer and just invite the Lord to bless our time, to enrich us as leaders, to equip us, and so that we can feel empowered to do this great work that God has called us to. So let me pray, and then we'll continue on our program. Father God, I'm just thankful for the leaders and the pastors who are here today. Lord, I pray that you bless them. I pray that you open their hearts and minds to some of the principles and practices that we're going to lay out in this webinar. I pray for those who especially maybe are coming in here feeling a little discouraged. I pray that you lift them up, fill them with your Holy Spirit, give them strength and courage to lead in these challenging times. We know that when we look at all the different challenges in front of us, Lord, they can be daunting, but we know, Lord, that you're going before us, that there's great power in the leading of your Spirit. So I pray that we can follow that and put our hope and trust in that today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, David, I'm going to pass things off to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Joe. It is great to see you all here. Thank you for being here. And let me just say, Joe, what an amazing leader. I'm so grateful for you. Thanks for your steady work and just your partnership with so many people and for the team of people that you'll be hearing from today. So, hey, let's dive in. I want to talk about this study called Discipleship and Community. It's hard to say that I have like a favorite study, but this is one of my favorites from the last couple of years. And some of the findings that we uncovered in partnership with RightNow Media. You'll be hearing from Brian Mosley, a good friend and a ministry colleague who cares so much about what the church does and how it disciples. And I want to begin by talking about the different ways in which we learn. This is based on a big national study. We get a chance of doing conversations with people around the country on different subjects. In this particular case, we're interviewing people who are active churchgoers, some who are in groups, some who are not in groups, some who are being mentored, some who are not being mentored, some who might have a warm, transformational household environment, some who do not. And so I'll be sharing some of those results in our time together, but this represents a national cross-section of churchgoers across the country and using great quantitative research to try to understand a little bit more about what's happening. Now, I want to begin with this premise that relationships catalyze growth. And this is, I think, a key biblical principle. It's a key just observational principle that we grow in relationship first with God. We see in First John, we love because he first loved us. We love others in part because we're able to be loved by others. I think there was a Mr. Rogers quote that was like, we are loved into loving. And this is a core principle that people help us to grow into all that God has made us to be, has created us to be. And so when we think about this idea of relationships catalyzing growth, I want to suggest that relationships are actually going to get more and more complicated in our society. They are very complicated today. Human relationships since the dawn of time are complicated, but with complex issues and trends like social media and technology, and we'll talk a little about some of these things, and loneliness and isolation. Relationships are very complicated, and I believe that gospel community is one of the superpowers of the church today. People are looking for community. They're looking for a place to belong. They're looking for a place to be known. And so we're talking about these different kind of contexts in which people can be known. So here's some examples of how I believe relationships are getting more complicated. So people are lonely and isolated. Maybe you've seen the data around just loneliness and isolation and young adults, the mental health challenges. We'll be hearing from Kara Powell later today and her work with younger generations and Gen Z and kind of the challenge of mental health and where the church can show up in relation to that. So people are lonely and isolated. Despite being more connected than ever, we're sometimes more disconnected. Another trend is that people are surprisingly open spiritually, and they're very open to Jesus. So there seems to be this openness to relationships with the divine, and so this is an unexpected trend. The last 2 3 years, we've been seeing a steady rise of the percentage of Americans who say they've made a commitment to Jesus that is still important in their life. And I think that is another great example of how relationships are more complicated, are more open, there's more potential, there's more kinetic energy in the relational space today. Another trend is that young women are increasingly churchless. And this relates very particularly to our question of relationships catalyzing growth, because women are often at the forefront of relationships, both in the home, in the workplace. God has created men and women with such unique aspects of how they relate to others, and the fact that young women are more likely than ever to say that they're religiously unaffiliated, and they're even more likely than young men to say they're religiously unaffiliated. There's a whole range of questions around sort of gender and women and how they relate in and to our churches. So that's a critical question for us to address. And then the fourth thing I want to talk about is that people are turning to technology for answers. So there's a lot of good social research around what's happening with technology, obviously with the smartphone, and then with social media. Now we're at the dawn of AI. I actually think you could map the primary generational experiences. So sort of millennials were at the dawn of sort of smartphones, and Gen Z is at the dawn of social media, was sort of raised during that kind of context. And I think Gen Alpha is going to be the generation defined by the rise of AI. And there's lots of really interesting and sometimes troubling data around the degree to which people are using AI as a therapist and life coach and best friend, and soon enough romantic partner, and all those things. So relationships are complicated enough, and now we have this incredible, powerful, magical tool called artificial intelligence that can sort of mirror what it means to have a confidant and a friend and someone who you could ask some pretty personal questions. And again, I think this is not necessarily why AI was designed, but the way human beings work is that we use these tools for the relational outlet that they represent. Okay, so those are just some of the broad stroke things. I just want to kind of paint the picture. Like you're not alone if you think the ministry has gotten more complicated. And again, we come back to this idea that gospel community is actually one of the superpowers of the church. And so we set out about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, to study this very question: how can we help people be discipled and transformed through gospel community? And that, again, is at the heart of some of the work that I know our friends at RightNow Media and some of the guests that you will be hearing from today, that relationships catalyze growth. We are loved into loving. And so how can we help set people up to have the most loving, formative, gospel-centered experiences possible? Well, that was at the heart of this study. And you'll see here's the cover of that book. And we were looking at 3 particular kinds of relational experiences: small groups, households, and mentoring relationships. Those are sort of 3 different formative relational environments. And to be particular, we weren't just saying, hey, do you attend a small group, or are you a part of a household? But we actually used these definitions when we asked our sample about their experiences. So you can see small groups that make attendees feel like they belong, and that they're part of a family, households that pray together and care about each other's faith and spiritual well-being, mentorships that make the individual a better person and invest in their success. So those are particular ways. And even if you're just watching along, you might pull up your phone and just take a picture of that slide. Again, you can check it out. We're happy to give this to you in any way you need it. But think about how we could measure the relational health and the kind of, to use a phrase that I know my friend Kara uses, that People need warm emotional connections. That warm is the new cool. All credit to Kara for that phrase. Warm relational connections in our churches. And how can people feel that kind of connection, either in a small group, a household, or a mentorship relationship? Now, here's where it gets cool. I've got sort of three data slides to show you. And this particular one, these next couple slides are so cool. Some of my favorites of the last couple of years. Don't have favorites, but this is one of my favorites. You can see the definitions there on the left. You can see we interviewed 4,000 church-going adults, a huge sample, randomly representative of churchgoers, different, sort of Catholic, Protestant, all sorts of different denominations would be included, all different ethnicities. So it's a nice, clear picture of what's happening with the relational ministry of churches. Now, check it out. Only 38% of churchgoers are in a small group that meets the definition I just gave you. Only 31% of churchgoers are in a mentoring relationship, that's the blue, that meets the definition I just showed you there on the left. Interestingly, only 33% of churchgoers say they're in a household that meets the definition that we have there, on the left, that they pray together and care about each other's faith and spiritual well-being. So that should just, first of all, stop us in our tracks. How can we help increase the percentage of churchgoers who are in these formative relational experiences? And if you can take anything from our time together, even measuring the relational health in these three areas in your church would be a really important thing to do. What percentage of your church is in these kinds of small groups, these kinds of households, these kind of mentoring relationships? So that's first and foremost. Let's measure relationships. Let's measure what matters. Let's not just measure whether they show up on Sunday, but let's measure whether they are participating in these kind of formative relational experiences. Important, critical stuff for us to do. Now, here's where the payoff is. Notice that down on the bottom right, only 12% of all churchgoers in our national sample are in those three formative relationships. That's about 1 in every 8. And I want to show you my favorite slide of this whole deck and of this study is this. We're comparing now people that have all three of those relationships. That includes small groups, households, and mentors, which we just talked about. And then we're comparing those churchgoers who have none of those three. So we're just putting the buckets of people who've got three different kinds of formative relational experiences around them and people that have none. And I want you just to notice the huge difference in the faith expression of those people. Now, correlation does not equal causation. We don't know what specifically were part of the triggers. Maybe it's just true that people that have a really strong faith orient towards those relational environments. But it's just critical for us to see that when it comes to all of these aspects of faith, the very things we got in ministry to do, following Jesus, being positioned to share our faith, being invested in the church, integrating our faith into everyday life. And you can see the very specific kind of wording of the questions. This to me just shows that the gospel works, and it works best when we're in formative relational environments like mentors and households of faith and small groups. And this, I think, was such gold for us because it like, okay, cool. This gives us a map. So, for example, how can you increase the percentage of people who are in these three kinds of formative experiences? How can you help them see the benefits that come by being relationally connected to others? And then the study is full of all sorts of really cool things. But here's another example where we were even looking at those who are in small groups. How can we notice the differences between those who are part of a group where there's a trusted, effective leader, and those who might have other small group experiences where they don't feel that kind of trusted, effective leadership. So how important it is for us to train people, not just to throw them into the deep end, but to train them to be relationally sensitive, emotionally connected, warm, lead where they need to, hang back where they need to. Lots of things that we'll be talking about today and ongoing. But look at the difference here. It would support me in a time of need, is a place where I feel I belong, feels like family, is inviting to new people, is essential to my faith, celebrates together, all sorts of really interesting findings there. Even the second from the bottom is a place where I feel I can be vulnerable. A good example, right, of like the kind of places that we're we're needing in our moment when relationships are really, really complicated. All right, so that's just a few of the findings from this really incredible study. Again, here's the cover of that book. Would love to have you join us in that collab that Joe mentioned. A really great place for us to actually think about how to architect good, warm, emotional climates in our small groups, households, and mentoring relationships. And I'll just close with this. I've spent a lot of time the last couple of years in this section of Second Timothy 1 for lots of different reasons, but it's Paul writing to Timothy, reminding him of his own household. He says, "Hey, I remember the faith of your mother and grandmother, Lois and Eunice, and like the same faith that beats in them beats in you." And there's this mentoring relationship from Paul to Timothy, really beautiful kind of expressions. And I love that in this section, he's saying, hold on to the pattern of wholesome teaching you learned from me. Relationships catalyze growth. A pattern that's shaped by the faith and love that you have in Christ Jesus. Relationships catalyze growth. Through the power of the Holy Spirit, the relationship with the Holy Spirit catalyzes growth. Who lives within us, carefully guard the precious truth that has been entrusted to you. So again, I think there's so much for us to be learning from good research like this. And then, of course, the question that comes to us is how will we apply it? That's the question we'll turn now to. But thanks so much for joining us. I believe this study is just one of the really crystal clear pictures of the way we can build a better church, a more relationally connected, wholehearted place for vulnerable Christian community to grow and for our roots to go down deep in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, great thoughts, David. Man, I get to hang out with you every day and hear this stuff, but man, to hear it again is just a great reminder, not just as somebody who works at Barna, but I was just at my small group kickoff last night at my church. I'm a small group leader. And so some of these things you said today, I'm like, okay, I need to remember that when I'm on the kind of the front lines of leading my small group, that what I'm doing actually matters. It's making a difference. And so those stats are a good reminder of that. So appreciate you, brother.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm going to bring on a good friend of mine, our partner, yes, but actually someone who's become a really good friend of mine, Brian Mosley. And Brian, I'm going to actually figure out how to okay, there you go. Yeah, Brian, thanks for being here, by the way. And I'll just say, I know David feels this. We talk about you guys all the time. You guys are not just great partners, but great friends. And so to be able to do this great work alongside you is really special. So, Brian, I want you, I know I introduced you earlier as the president of RightNow Media, which you are. But real quick, you're more than that, right? Because you also serve, in your local church. I'd love for you to just do a quick intro for people to
Sure.
get to know you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, we've loved partnering with you guys. Yeah, president right now media, but like a lot of you guys out there, family person. I mean, husband for 25 years, got 4 kids, 2 in college, 2 in high school. We've been a part of the same church here in the Dallas area called Allen Bible Church for since it began 21 years ago. Been an elder there for that long. It is what I would say normal church. I mean, in Dallas, every church is huge. It seems like we're a normal sized church. When you look at the data across the country, we're a couple hundred people big. And so I've loved serving, week in and week out as a life group leader and as an elder and just trying to pray for and be a part of what God's doing in that local community.
Yeah. I've always appreciated that, Brian, because you're leading this like really incredible organization. I would say, I know you guys don't brag about this often, but I'm pretty sure you're like the world's largest provider of video-based small group curriculum. Is that right?
Hopefully, probably, I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean, we have a
probably.
lot of video content. Yes, that
Well,
is.
yeah, that's the point. You have a lot. Even as a small group leader, I was on like last night trying to prepare for the fall for like what I want to do with my small group, and I just jumped on right now, and I was like, man, there's so much great content for small group leaders. And so just appreciate what you guys do. But, I think I want to actually tap into your perspective as somebody who serves an organization that serves the church in this way. I would just love to know, like, I mean, there's been so much that's changed over the last 5 years when it comes to church and, post COVID and, where I would just love to know, like, what are a couple, like one or two important insights from your vantage point as you serve the church in a unique way that you think as church leaders that we need to be paying attention to?
Yeah. I mean, a big part of the reason why we joined, arms with you guys to do this research project was because we thought and believed that community would be so important to disciple making and just to people's spiritual journey. And certainly the data has, proved that out. So I think the biggest kind of aha moment or trend that I want to emphasize is just as the church, as people, who are on this call with us today, church leaders, pastors, like we cannot forsake the fact that we have the opportunity to offer this awesome community to the people that we're trying to serve. They are starving for it, they're looking for it. And I mean, RightNow Media is a content ministry. So I believe in content, but I have to say, loud and clear, content is not the answer. I mean, content can be a part of somebody's spiritual growth, a part of that discipleship journey, but content by itself is just content. And we are all overwhelmed with content these days between Netflix and Spotify and podcasts. And I mean, there's so much content we can get access to across all spectrums. So content can't be the answer because there's a plethora of content. So the question is, what are people striving for? They're striving for community. So interestingly, when we've kind of looked at some of the churches and the small groups that we're serving, from a content perspective, the without a shadow of a doubt, the number one and highest viewed content that we have in our library is books of the Bible. People are just hungry for scripture. They're wanting to get together with their men or their women or their married couples or their students and just get into scripture. And so that's been highly encouraging to us. And so we've kind of doubled down and continue to create, those resources that can fill, that need and that gap. But it's just great to think, okay, people are hungry to know what does God say and what does his word say. The other thing, second thing I would just mention is, and this kind of came out from some of the research you guys did. People want to be discipled by somebody more than just their pastor. Like I'm friends with our pastor, big fan of pastors, big fan of sermons, and yet people need more than just a pastor and more than just a sermon to help them grow. And so when we're asking those folks, why are you part of a small group? They're saying, because I need to learn from other people besides my pastor. And so I'm thinking, okay, again, we have an opportunity as churches to provide these great communities. So my encouragement, my challenge to the church leaders out there, and I mean I'm in that camp as an elder of my church, is are we doing that? Like, are we actually creating and providing that community, or are we just throwing more content at people through sermons and programs and podcasts and hoping they figure it out? So
Mhm.
I don't know if that's a good answer, Joe, but that's the thoughts that come to my mind.
No, I think your insight about, I mean, especially this is insightful coming from a content, organization, that you're even recognizing that what you do is a means to this greater end. And so then that's an important point. So many times we put so much kind of effort and strategy into the content. That is not what's going to advance, discipleship in our churches. And so I love the fact that you guys, and I know that bleeds through your organization. You really believe that connection and community is really what it's all about, and content is a way to, when it's used in the right way in that context is a really powerful thing. So, hey, Brian, we've been kind of partnering with you guys on some things. Just real quick, I wanted you to highlight, I didn't plan for this question, but I think it's really important that as leaders and as pastors and church leaders that we're pouring into ourselves before we kind of think about pouring into our congregation, our communities. And you guys have created this really great resource called Pastors Plus. I would love for you to just quick 30 seconds. What's the vision behind that? How can we get connected with that resource?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Again, our heart's community and trying to help these churches, in their disciple making efforts. We've created a lot of content for small groups, but we kind of realized we've never really helped the leaders of those groups or even the leaders of the churches as a ministry as much as we would like to do. And so we created Pastors Plus as a small kind of strategic library of courses intended for the pastor to use with their leaders to, at the local level, at the round the table at your own church, go, okay, how are we making disciples? How are we, multiplying our church? How are we doing evangelism? Having some trusted guides, on the video guide you through those discussions. But the magic, so to speak, is when you as a local leadership team talk through those things. You said it earlier, we can all go to conferences. Conferences are great. One person comes back and says, hey, I've heard some great things, tries to translate that to the group. It's hard to do that. So
Mhm.
this is a chance to kind of bring those teaching and discovery moments back into the local church and walk through that together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for investing in those types of resources for church leaders, Brian. What you guys are doing matters, and appreciate you and your partnership. And yeah, thanks for being with us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
All right. Take care. Well, hey, before I bring on our panel of experts and leaders, I just want to again just reiterate this amazing opportunity. I'm going to bring this slide back up just to share it. And I didn't mention this before, but we actually are launching this next month, September 16th. So it is right around the corner. This isn't one of those opportunities you want to kind of put off, say, how I'll think about it later. We think this is actually a really critical time as we're entering into, like I said earlier, I'm in the middle of launching my fall small group. You have so many like small groups that are, launching mentoring groups, mentoring opportunities. It's a great ministry season, as we know, as we kick off the fall. So we thought, hey, it's a perfect time to put together a 5-week learning community for church leaders. Again, this is called Barna Collab, and we're really kind of focusing on how to create transformational small groups. So it's a 5-week experience. You log in like every Tuesday for 90 minutes. We have individual and team options, both at affordable rates. And again, you can take advantage of this webinar special. Webinar 20 is the promo code. You can go, click on this, or access this through this QR code. Hannah from our team will also put the link in the chat. And again, we really want you to take advantage of this. We priced this affordably, and RightNow Media has kind of helped fund this program so that we can make this approachable and accessible for every church, every size. And so again, we'd encourage you to not delay 48 hours on this flash promo code, right? Webinar 20. We'd encourage you to take advantage of that. We're going to have great leaders besides Barna Research, the Barna Research team showing up to go deeper in the insights. You're going to hear from experts like Ed Stetzer. He's kicking things off on September 16th. We've got Christelle Acevedo from Transformation Church is going to be with us. And then Robbie Engel, who you'll be hearing from in a little bit, but he's going to do a couple sessions with us as well. So again, check out Transformational Small Group Collab. We hope to see you there. Well, hey, I'm going to invite our panel on. As they come on, I'm going to introduce them. I just want to, first of all, just say thank you, Kara, Matt, Robbie, for joining us. Dr. Kara Powell, you're like one of the go-to experts. I mean, you just heard how much, David just quoted you. We're always kind of quoting you and referencing your expertise. But, Kara, you have just been doing this for so long and invested in this next generation. You're the executive director of the Fuller Youth Institute. You're the chief of leadership formation at Fuller Seminary. You're also the founder of 10 by 10. I'm sure you're doing a lot of other things too that we don't have time to highlight, but you've invested so much. You're a nationally recognized voice on youth and family discipleship, like David said. And you're the co-author of a brand new book that was just released, I think, just a few weeks ago called The Future Focused Church. So I'd encourage you to check that out. Robbie Engel. Robbie is the president and CEO of TrueFace, which is a ministry helping people experience deeper relationships with God and others. Robbie, you bring years of experience from North Point Community. You have counseling expertise and certification. You're also you've done international relief work, and now you live in Atlanta, Georgia with your wife. And I always have to kind of do a double take on this. 8 kids, so maybe we'll get into that in a little bit, but yeah, just appreciate what you and TrueFace are doing. And then Matt Mano, Matt is the next gen pastor at New Life Fellowship in Queens. You serve with Rich Velotis and the great team there, leading ministry for kids, youth, and families. And I would say is like one of the most diverse communities in the United States, maybe even in the world. And so you're also developing a great curriculum called Emotionally Healthy Teenager, which we're looking forward to that being released in the coming months. So again, Matt, Kara, Robbie, thank you all for being here today.
It's great to be on the conversation.
Those are long intros because you guys are doing a lot of great things for the kingdom. So, but I didn't want to sell those things short. But now that we're done with the intros, I really want to get into the data. Now, we could talk about data forever. Kara, especially you're a researcher, and you could probably go on forever about the research. But we're going to do just a quick kind of lightning round, okay? Based on either something you heard from David or maybe something you read in the research report we did with Right Now called Discipleship and Community. What was like one stat or insight that jumped out to you, and why? So I'm going to start with Kara, and then I'll go to Matt, and then end with Robbie.
Yeah, well, in a word or maybe 3 words, I would say leadership, leadership, leadership. The slide that stood out so much to me is how having a trusted and effective small group leader really doubles so many important variables we want in our communities and we want in individuals' growth. And I think the word trusted is a fascinating adjective. And I'm such a fan of Barna's research. I'm not sure, Barna, that you would have used the word trusted 10 years ago. But what we're seeing now in the US, really across generations, is that there is this lack of trust that individuals feel toward institutions, toward religious institutions, and toward leaders. So the good news, and I think your research supports this, is that trust can be built or rebuilt. Any adult, any congregant can rebuild trust, not through heroic acts. It doesn't take heroic acts to build trust, but everyday acts of being consistent and loving. So that's what good small group leaders do. And when they do that, look at how that doubles so many important things in small group members' lives.
Yeah, that's good. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, I think there's the statistic about the three relationships, and 91% of people that have all three of those relationships, a mentor, a small group leader, and then the third one was, I can't remember off the top of my head, but 91% of those people feel like household, thank you. Yeah, feel like they are being effectively discipled. I mean, you talk about emphasizing programming in church. I lead a youth ministry, I lead a next gen ministry. I'm always thinking, oh, what's the next thing I want to get people to come to? This data is saying the next thing I should be getting people to come to is relationships, and a multiplicity of different types of relationships. And along the lines of what Kara shared, the idea that character trumps training it's so important. If you can have the most trained, equipped leaders, but if they're not good people, then they're not going to be effective in reaching these upcoming generations who are looking for people they can count on, they can trust. Those are the things that really jumped out at me.
Yeah, that's really good, Matt. Robbie, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to double click on what Kara said because that resonated with me the most. And it was really interesting that the majority of churches don't have a training for small group leaders. And there wasn't much differentiation between those that did with whether they resulted in more trustworthy leaders. And so two factors there is it's all about the leader, as Kara said, and also how the art of how to develop a pipeline of trustworthy leaders is pretty significant. And we might be thinking about leader development and leader training wrongly if our outcomes are not lined up with our training.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I want to dig into some of these points a little bit deeper in a little bit. But before I do, I just want to remind people, if you have questions for Kara, Matt, or Robbie, or David, go ahead and pop those in the Q&A feature, not the chat. So I see some questions coming in the chat. They're actually some good ones. Transfer those in the Q&A. It's going to be easier for us to track. But yeah, so I have a question. I'm going to kind of go to each of you one at a time with a specific question for you, because what's really cool is I invited you all three because I think you all have kind of an expertise and passion into one of the three groupings that David outlined. So I think, hey, it'd be great to kind of go deep with each of you individually. So Kara, let's start with you, because you and I have been talking for, I think, years now about your passion for mentoring. And the resources that you guys have created for that are really great. In fact, we have teamed up together with RightNow to create one, which maybe you can kind of talk about in a little bit. But before you talk about that resource, I want to just talk about mentoring, in general. Kind of help us define maybe the opportunity right now to look at mentoring a little bit different, a little bit deeper. So what are the opportunities you see right now for churches in this space of mentoring? Maybe what are some cautions? And then maybe for some people who are saying, okay, I can get after that, Kara, but I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to kind of have a practical first step.
Yeah, you bet. You're right. I'm passionate about mentoring. And if I was a pastor watching this webinar or reading this data, I would think, okay, I'm going to try to change our church to emphasize mentoring, to emphasize small groups, to emphasize households. And that's so noble. But according to Harvard Business Review, 70% of change efforts fail. Now, that's across the board. I don't think it's any lower of a percentage for churches. So I want the churches who are part of this conversation to be in that 30% that succeeds in being a more discipleship-focused community. So based on our research with churches who've effectively made changes, here's one of my top recommendations. experiment around the edges. You know, it's tempting as a pastor to think what we need to do is launch this major program. Well, usually it's more effective if you start with some pilot programs, you know, maybe do a couple small groups, maybe have 10 or 15, 20 people in mentoring relationships. Invite the right people to be part of those mentoring relationships who are diverse and have different influence across the church. Well, then that lays the foundation you need to then expand. So wise churches generally, there's exceptions to this, but generally it's experiments on the edges that make their way into the center of the church. And I can't help but say, you know, one of the great ways to start mentoring in your church is by mobilizing adults to invest in young people. The good news is adults in your church, they already have relationships with young people, a niece or nephew, someone they see at their church, a neighbor, etc. And so that's why we partnered with Barna and with RightNow Media and 10 by 10, a discipleship collaborative that I help lead, to create a whole host of free resources called Simple Mentoring. Because any adult can build trust and be a simple mentor with young people. So if you go to simplementoring.org, thanks Hannah for putting that in chat, you can get sermon outlines, kickstarts, jumpstarts for your senior pastor to start mobilizing adults, especially some experiments on the edges that can create a mentoring culture throughout your church.
Yeah, that's really great. It's a great resource. We did that with Lisette Frazier on your team, and Derwin Gray
Yep.
co-hosted that series. And there's a lot of other great resources surrounding that. But yeah, Kara, that's just a great reminder. And it's really good too. Before I jump to some of these other questions, like Kara, like these things don't have these three kind of aspects of relational community-based discipleship don't have to be exclusive. Like, so I'm thinking as a small group leader, I'm not just leading a small group. I'm also in this position where I am a mentoring figure.
Yeah.
And not only that, but I'm actually called to like create and multiply myself into other mentoring leaders. And so I'm thinking like, I love how some of the principles you just talked about actually relate to being in a household, a mentoring figure in a household, a mentoring
Yeah.
figure in a small group. And so I think there's this great kind of symbiotic relationship that all three of these areas have to one another. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so great thoughts there. So Robbie, I want to talk to you. I consider you one of the leading kind of small group gurus slash experts. I mean, you have so much to share. In fact, we could do entire webinars just with you, which is why we're doing Transformational Small Group Collab, right? Because we want to dig deeper into these things, which is why we're having you on. But I just want to kind of have you talk to the what I would call, and I've been there, so I'm not pointing fingers, the pastor or the small group, church leader who's just kind of feels stuck. We're in this moment where we're looking past, like in the past, like maybe 3 decades of small group ministry models and frameworks. And we're at this point in history where we're realizing that maybe some of the things we've done in previous decades just aren't working in the here and now. And we feel stuck. So, Robbie, I would just love to get really practical now and just say, for those leaders who are here that feel stuck, how do you get unstuck? And what are maybe some of the first, 1 or 2 practical steps to move towards transformational small groups?
Yeah, a couple minutes. I'll give you a couple silver bullets to fix discipleship in small groups, Joe. I will start by encouraging everybody. This is an art. It's not a science. And what comes to mind when you ask me that of what really helps churches get unstuck is not easy. Culture change takes it a couple years. So whatever you do, lower your expectations and then come back in 3 years if you really want to change the culture around relational discipleship. And also want to remind all of us that it's trusted relationships that lead to growth, as we're designed to grow through the context of relationships. It's not groups. Groups are simply an environment for us to connect relationally to grow spiritually as the body of Christ in a size and environment that's more conducive for growth, kind of like Jesus modeled. And it's not easy. Jesus didn't even bat 1,000, but it is doable. And I've learned from churches some things that lead to really healthy discipleship environments. And the first step, if there's one thing to get unstuck, is to focus on developing leaders. I think the health and the quality of your leaders makes up about 60% of whether or not a group is effective at helping people grow. And if you've got leaders, and I love your study, that are trustworthy and spiritually grounded, the groups almost always thrive. I know that leads to a couple of big questions, like what differentiates great group leaders from lame ones, and how do you build a pipeline of those leaders, which takes time and intentionality around their view of God, themselves. This is spiritual maturity, this is discipleship that you can do with a few that then ripple into many. But that's the starting point, to invest deeply in the spiritual maturity of the people who might lead one day. And when you do that, that will affect years to come. So you could start by finding the men and women who you would want replicated, who you want to mentor you in your life, and get them in a group and say, how do we multiply you? They know, and they'll figure it out. And then go, can you help me multiply yourself by loving deeply a smaller group of future or potential leaders in our church? That's I could talk about that all day, like you said, Joe. But step two, I think the next thing, other than leader development, is clarifying outcomes. A lot of ministries and churches we work with, they focus more on adjusting structures or programs without taking the time to ask, what are we actually aiming for? And there's usually two buckets, spiritual and relational. What impact will happen in the lives of the people? What does success look like? And if you can really hone in on that, the church leaders that hone in on that can then more easily work backwards and ask, okay, if that's the destination, what do we need to be doing now to help people get there? And that clarity helps you identify the gaps and align your ministry practices to result in growth instead of just activity, which we've all done and tried. And we wonder, is it really moving the needle? You said I get three. So step three, I would say the most overlooked is probably making sure that the leadership that that me, that Kara, that Matt, that Joe are living in authentic community ourselves. This is hard in ministry leadership, and we know we can only give away what we experience. But as pastors and leaders, if we're not in high trust relationships where we're known at a heart level, it's going to be hard to create that kind of culture at our church. So I would challenge all of us to not just create environments for others. Make sure you are the kind of environment where you're being known and encouraged and challenged, and that'll ripple into your ministry.
That's good stuff, Robbie. Thanks so much. And by the way, I'm just looking forward. I think we have one session just devoted to leaders and developing leaders. And so, Robbie, it's going to be great to go deeper in CoLab. So again, I just want to invite everyone, if you haven't signed up already, sign up for CoLab. It's going to be worth it. Matt, I love the ministry context you're in, right? And I love like your calling. You're a next gen pastor, but you guys have a really special church culture and environment, like that, Pete Scazzaro passed down to you guys, and Rich is stewarding that now with you, with this idea of emotionally healthy discipleship. Robbie was kind of just alluding to the fact that we need that type of environment so that people can live out of that. And the overflow of emotional healthy discipleship is healthy leaders and a robust group ministry. But I want to kind of get really deep into, like, you have a lot of experience working with parents in the context of like what we call kind of household discipleship. So, Matt, I'd love for you to kind of share what do you think we need? Maybe first of all, let's just talk about maybe some of the challenges that you're seeing in your church and maybe that you see in other churches when it comes to this partnership between parents as disciple makers and the church as a disciple making community. And what's your best advice for leaders who want to support parents better, to be more effective disciple makers in the home?
Yeah, no, I think the thing I realized was my attitude towards parents changed when I became one. So I recently became a parent like almost 5 years ago. At 39, my first child at 39. Good Lord, what was I thinking, Robbie? I've got 7 more to go. I catch up to you, but um, I think prior to that, in all my ministry experience, I thought of parents as people who only needed information. This is what you have to bring your children to. Here's the next event we're doing. And I stopped seeing them as people who needed information, and instead people I needed to resource and invest in directly. Because I realized parents don't see themselves as the primary means of their child's discipleship. They see the church as that. So I'm bringing my kid to you along with the weight of all these expectations that you're going to fix my child, you're going to keep them connected to faith long term, and that I don't actually have to participate or do anything. When in fact, what we found is parents are the best means of discipleship in the life of a child. And so what we decided to do was put some of our emphasis into resourcing parents. Let's do classes. Let's give them books. Let's give them seminars. Let's give them everything we possibly can to equip them in their parenting journey. But the other thing we decided to do was parents just need space to be human beings apart from their children, because we can over-identify them. Oh, you're so-and-so's parent. Well, no, you're Robbie, you're Joe, you're Kara, and there are real things that you're carrying that can make parenting difficult, that can make discipling somebody that you sometimes you just want to kill. If I can just be really honest, I have to now disciple you in the way of Jesus, but I would rather you just not be around right now. So we need to give parents space to just be really honest. So we created things like listening partnerships in our church, where literally I get a one-on-one session with somebody and I get to just vent my parenting frustrations to a non-anxious, non-judgmental, calm presence. And then I just get to let all of those things out. And what we have found is that parents are responding to that in incredible ways. They're approaching their children with less anger, less frustration, a lot more grace, and they're also viewing themselves now through the lenses of, oh, it's actually not Matt's job to disciple my kid. It's Matt's job to help me disciple my kid. It's Matt's job to help equip me to disciple my child. And so we're really leaning into this idea of we're partnering with parents. We're not doing the job of a parent. And in some respects, this is the way Rich says it. We have to reparent parents sometimes to help them understand and pay attention to, hey, you parent a particular way because of the way that you were parented, because of what you experienced. And that's where we bring in a lot of Pete's work with emotionally healthy discipleship, and specifically looking at things like a genogram. Map your family and the ways that you were parented, and then look at how you're reapplying those things in your own parenting. It's very eye-opening. And then we set those people up with therapists to talk through, hey, here's some stuff I'm unearthing and unpacking, because we want to have a holistic approach. It's not just, oh, well, here's some Bible verses about parenting. Well, like, here's therapy and Jesus, and let's get you a holistic thing that you can take and apply to your parenting journey. So that's kind of what we're at with home discipleship.
That's great. I'm so glad we're recording this. I've listened to a lot of questions about, hey, are you recording this? Are we going to make the recording available? Yes, because like there's so much that you're going to maybe want to go back and listen to or share with other people that weren't here, just from what our panel's talking about. So I'm glad for that, because we're going to run out of time for Q&A. So I'm going to try to work in some questions with some of the remaining questions we have. I've seen quite a few questions about the next generation and like, how do we maybe need to rethink or reimagine how we engage and disciple the next generation? So, Karen, Matt, I want to kind of take this question and have you just really quickly, both of you are committed to engaging in discipling the next generation. So what would you say is something that we need to rethink when it comes to next generation ministry, and maybe even outside of like what kind of the programmed ministry that even Matt kind of said, like a different way of thinking about engaging and discipling younger people? So Kara, let's start with you.
Okay, I'm going to give two things. Number one, small steps. And number two, go to where young people are. And I love what one church is doing to make that practical. They've created a Google Doc so that young people can add their events, parents can add young people's events into this Google Doc. And then every week during the worship service, there's a slide during announcements of young people's events in the next week or two. So adults, especially senior adults, who have a lot of time, can show up, cheer on young people. Those are small steps that create deeper mentoring relationships.
That's worth the price of the webinar right there, Kara. I mean, that's good. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, I would say intergenerational relationships are extremely important. We have to realize we need to back away from looking for the hip, cool youth leader and find the person who really cares to make a deep investment in the life of a kid and a teenager. And so we're opening up our recruiting efforts and saying, you could be 65, 75, 95 years old, and we want you to find a space and a place to invest in the next generation, because they need your stories, they need your heart, and they need your experience.
Yeah, that's really good. And Man, I just love, I've seen this in action when it works really well, and it's a beautiful thing. It's kind of like you look back to the first century church and say that's really what the early church fathers and mothers were really wanting. That picture right there that you just painted. Robbie, there's quite a few questions that I think can be encapsulated into one question, and it kind of like merges with some of the research we've done on engaging the spiritually open. We see this amazing trend where people are more open now to Jesus in the church than they were before the pandemic. The last 5 years have really kind of reawakened the kind of the general population to spirituality. A great opportunity. But how does that come alongside, small groups and the opportunity to disciple people in community? I've seen some questions in there, Robbie, in the Q&A about like, how do we invite people outside of our church into small groups? Because that's been really tough to do that. So practically, how do we meet this spiritually open moment where it's at? And where does small group and kind of relational based discipleship come into that?
Yeah, I think we have such an opportunity because of the disconnectedness and the longing for real community that people have with a spiritual openness. And I don't, this might be me, but programs are one thing and processes or different strategies, but evangelism, relational discipleship, especially evangelism, always starts with trust. And that's especially true for the next generation craving this. So if we want to connect evangelism to relational discipleship, it's pretty easy. And I think we start with asking ourselves the question, do I have at least one real friendship with someone who doesn't yet know Jesus? And we can ask our people that too as ministry leaders. Do we have one friend that we're spending time with, which is loving them by giving them attention, time, innate needs that we all have as humans? Do we have a friend that doesn't follow Jesus? That's the starting point. That's how you build trust. So I'd encourage us all to make friends with people, not programs, as our first strategy for evangelism.
Yeah, that's great. When you talked about that, I was reminded of, master plan of evangelism,
That's it.
Robert Coleman, like the discipleship happens before the conversion moment. Right. And so if we can
That's
kind
right.
of reorient the way we think of evangelism and discipleship, that we start discipling people long before they raise their hand and make the altar call. And that starts with like our relational circles expanded to where we're discipling people who have not yet made a decision to follow Jesus.
Yep.
And then you combine that with what we have, which is what David said earlier about the superpower of the church, which is this community that you
That's
can't
it.
replicate anywhere else. It's a special thing. So how do we bring that to the world in a really meaningful and authentic and trustworthy way? So, hey, we just got a couple minutes left. I just want to just closing thought, 30 seconds. What's just one encouraging word you'd like to leave for our audience here today? Matt, let's start with you and then go to Robbie and then we'll end with Kara.
Yeah, you guys are doing the most important work in the church. And I think if it's not about getting it perfectly right, it's not about having the best programs, most polished. It's really about creating meaningful connections with the people around you, with the people in front of you. If you can lean into that, I really firmly believe that we'll see a generation come to know Jesus in deeper ways than we've ever seen before.
I love that. I just love it's an honor that I'm on a webinar with people who are signing up for a webinar to talk about this. So I just wanted to say thanks and love people well. Be friends, which looks a lot like friendship. So yeah, hang out, enjoy people, love them. That's the brand of the church of what Jesus makes possible. If he loves me like crazy, and as I receive that and trust that, it should overflow. And that's fun. And thank you for signing up to this webinar to talk about this stuff with us. This is a great group.
I'll quote the very first sentence in our Future Focused Church book. The best days of the church are ahead. And folks, I believe the best days of your church are ahead.
I love that. And this is the thing. If we truly believe in the hope of the gospel, if it's truly penetrated our own hearts and souls, and as Robbie said, that it overflows, like Kara, we have to believe that. And it doesn't mean we turn a blind eye to the things that we need to really address and focus on. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what wakes us up in the morning and what allows us to have peace as we go to bed at night and for everything in between. It's the hope that comes through the gospel of Jesus and his bride, the church. And so, Kara, I couldn't think of a better way to end things with to say, like, yeah, let's get really specific, let's get practical, but let's also remember the very basic truths that we're all called to implement and to carry out, which is that community matters. The body of Christ is the body for a reason, with the hands and feet and the different parts that make up one whole. And that's what we get to do, and that's what we get to steward as leaders. So, like Robbie said, and like we've been saying, there's a lot of people here in this audience today who are committed to that. And so we just want to encourage you on behalf of Barna and RightNow Media, all of these leaders here today. I know I speak for David and the rest of the team. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Keep it up. Be looking for the email where we're going to share the webinar replay for today. And if you want to go back and watch it again, or if you want to share it with somebody who wasn't able to be here, please do so. And again, sign up for our collab. We hope to see you there in that 5-week learning community that launches September 16th. Again, thanks for being here. We appreciate you guys. We're in your corner. Have a great rest of your day and rest of your week.